Many are still grieving. Some families will be lost to one another forever. To those of you who face the difficulties of reconnecting with family and establishing ongoing relationships, we say sorry. We offer this apology in the hope that it will assist your healing and in order to shine a light on a dark period of our nation's history. To those who have fought for the truth to be heard, we hear you now.
You're listening to Adopt Perspective Podcast, a podcast for anyone affected by adoption. I'm your host and president of Jigsaw Queensland, Jo Sparrow. This podcast is a production of Jigsaw Queensland Post-Adoption Support Service. However, the views expressed are those of the people participating and not necessarily Jigsaw Queensland. The podcast discusses adult themes and listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Adopt Perspective. I'm Jo Sparrow, your host and the president of Jigsaw Queensland. DNA testing has become an increasingly important tool for many people impacted by adoption, whether it's used to search for family, confirm relationships, or update legal records. But with so many types of DNA testing now available, it can also be confusing to know which tests are appropriate for different needs and what the process actually involves. Recently, we spoke to Melanie Dunstan, a trained genetic genealogist, about genealogical DNA testing through companies such as AncestryDNA. But today I'm joined by Kate Pippia, the director of identilab, an Australian-owned and operated DNA testing laboratory based in Brisbane. identilab specialises in a range of accredited DNA testing services, including legal paternity and maternity tests, kinship tests, and peace of mind testing services that can be incredibly valuable for people navigating the complexities of post-adoption discovery and reunion. On a personal note, I used identilab myself last year to complete a legal paternity test with my father. This allowed me to add his name to my pre-adoption birth certificate, something that will become even more meaningful for me if Queensland's adoption legislation is reformed to allow integrated birth certificates. So today I want to try and demystify DNA testing, clarify the differences between genealogical tests and legal testing, and explore the types of testing that identilab offers that are most relevant to adopted people and their families. I'm so pleased to welcome the director of identilab to Adopt Perspective. Kate, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jo. That was a wonderful introduction.
I keep tripping over the name of your company and I feel like I'm going to do it over and over.
Everyone does. We get lots of different iterations of how to say the name. And my surname. You got my surname right, so that's amazing.
Oh, that's good because I forgot to check before we hit record. So I guess a good place to start is if you could tell us a little about identilab, who you are, what services you provide, and what makes your laboratory unique in the DNA testing space.
Certainly. So I think you covered a lot of it off already. But we are female-owned, Brisbane-based DNA testing laboratory in Brisbane. We have accreditation from the National Association of Testing Authorities, or NATA. And what that means is we've been deemed to be performing our work in accordance with an international standard, which is called ISO 17025, and also in accordance with the requirements of the family law regulations for this sort of testing. We offer at-home testing for people that are just slightly interested in, there's a niggling doubt and they want to test a child to see if that's actually their child. And then we have the legally admissible testing, which you undertook with us for the purpose of changing a birth certificate. In terms of what makes us unique, I feel like, there's only about 4 or 5 labs in Australia that can perform this sort of testing under those standards and accreditation. And I feel like our point of difference is, first of all, customer service. We truly care about our customers and want to find the answers for them. And I think that comes from the fact that a lot of us, or all of us actually, have either a forensic science qualification or a forensic science background. And I think that's important because we have worked under previously professional practice code of conduct and all of that sort of stuff. So we've developed one in-house for that purpose as well. So we're very strong in ethics and integrity.
Yeah. And certainly my experience there was very warm, even though it was a torrential rain day when I arrived. I could barely make it in without being soggy, but it was a very warm experience.
We should have
Just
given you an identilab umbrella.
You should have given me one. Well, there's still time.
You have to pop in.
So, for those who may be new to DNA testing, can you explain the difference between genealogical DNA testing, like those offered by companies such as AncestryDNA and 23andMe, and the types of accredited DNA testing that identilab offers?
Yes. So companies like 23andMe, AncestryDNA are more focused on ancestry, ethnicity estimates, finding those distant relatives. I feel like a lot of people don't realize that when they submit a test for an ancestry comparison, they don't realize that they could be connected with relatives that they're not aware of. So that's an interesting thing. What we do is more targeted. So they look at DNA, which is called single nucleotide polymorphisms or SNPs, and they look at a huge amount of these, whereas we're looking at a smaller number of genetic markers, which are called STRs. So STRs are short tandem repeats, and they're considered, what we're looking at is considered non-informative junk DNA, and it's just a series of numbers that we can use to compare two people to each other and determine whether there is a likely relationship there.
Okay.
And our results, if collected according to the family law regulations, those results can be used for legal purposes, whereas ancestry testing cannot.
Yeah. So, what are the most common types of DNA tests that you provide that may be relevant to people impacted by adoption?
So generally, for the most part, we'll do a peace of mind paternity or maternity test in the first instance if they have found someone who they believe to be their biological parent. If that person is not available, we would do a kinship test, such as a half sibling test or even a full sibling test in some circumstances. If we've had customers who've had an ancestry test and have found a potential sibling or aunt or uncle or other relative, then they can come to us and confirm that relationship. And generally, in the first instance, it is just a peace of mind, an at-home test, just to confirm that information. And they will generally have other evidence that they've sort of gathered over the years to get to the point of a DNA test. So they sort of add it all hand in hand. In terms of, let's leave it at that.
That's good. Yeah. So there's no others that are commonly used in the adoption context, or that's pretty much it?
It's generally peace of mind.
Yeah.
In your circumstance, obviously you did a legal test. You can't use a kinship test to have a birth certificate change. Different states have different regulations around that, but generally a kinship test will not be able to be used for changing a birth certificate. There are some different state variations where you can apply for a court order and then they can change the birth certificate, but it's that's obviously not my field. I just do warn people that kinship tests can't be used to change legal documents.
Yeah. And I might add to that. So, with changing a pre-adoptive birth certificate, it's not a legal birth certificate. It's essentially been cancelled, that birth certificate. And so the legal one is the one that has your adoptive parents on it. So when I went to change my birth certificate, my pre-adoptive birth certificate, they couldn't even really tell me what they needed. Like if my biological mother was not willing to fill in the form, which she was not, then I had to find other ways to give them evidence, and they couldn't even really tell me what evidence I had to give them. But I pretty much had to just state my case and give them any evidence I could. And my decision was I could have maybe done the peace of mind test, but I decided to trump them and give them something they couldn't refute, which was the legal one, which was more expensive and not something that's available to everybody. And I understand that, but in my case, I thought I'm just going to give this my best crack first go. And I was able to do it with that. But I know some other people with that pre-adoptive non-legal birth certificate, they have been able to make some changes with less, but very hard to find out the parameters that births, deaths and marriages will apply. So yeah.
I agree. And I've had conversations with various births, deaths and marriages as well. And it's kind of depends who you talk to, best of 3. If you don't get a satisfactory answer the first time, you try again.
It's very
Asked to have it,
frustrating.
asked to have it escalated, all that sort of stuff. So they, even with the NADA accredited paternity tests, sometimes they don't understand that they can accept that, and we have to educate them a bit more around that.
Yeah. So we probably covered this a little bit, but in case there's something we haven't, can you explain the difference between a peace of mind and legal testing?
Yes. So the peace of mind testing is generally just, we'll send collection kits out to the clients and they perform that sample collection themselves. So it's a swab from the mouth. With that, there's no verification of who that sample came from. There's no chain of custody. So there is the possibility of fraud. So if someone didn't want to be related to someone, or didn't want this conversation to continue, they could swab a friend, and we would be none the wiser. So they would send their sample in labeled with their name, but the swab didn't come from them, and then we would report a non-parentage, when in actual fact it may truly be a parentage situation. But with the legal testing, again, it's done under the family law regulations, which prescribes how that sample collection has to take place, that there's a chain of custody, that their identities are verified. And so then, there's far less risk of fraudulent activity in those sample collections.
Yeah. So can you walk us through what's actually involved in doing a DNA test with identity lab? Look, I told you I keep tripping.
No problem. We get an S added onto the end of it a lot, identilabs. So samples are collected, like I just mentioned. It's a foam swab. It's rubbed on the inside of the cheeks. And then we use what's called an FTA card, which is a piece of archive paper with special chemicals in it. The swab gets pressed onto that and your DNA gets transferred onto that card. So it's locked into the fibers of that card and securely stored in that card for ever and a day. We don't keep it for ever and a day, I might add. But it just makes transport of those samples much easier, and processing is much easier for us as well. Paperwork that's required for the at-home test is basically, we just have an in-house consent form where we outline just some sort of specific sections of our terms of service and what we're offering them, and do they consent to that happening. For the legal testing, it's the same. We have an in-house consent form. There's also what's called a Form 3, which is an affidavit that each participant, or if it's a minor child or a person who's incapacitated, has to have their legal guardian complete for them. So that is basically also a consent form. A photograph of that person gets attached to that, and they're consenting to having a bodily sample taken from them for the purposes of a DNA parentage or kinship test. That form needs to be witnessed because it is an affidavit. It needs to be witnessed by someone who is qualified to witness that sort of a form, which is generally a Justice of the Peace, Commissioner for Declaration, or a legal practitioner. At the sample collection itself, there's another form called a Form 4. A photograph of the participant gets attached to that as well, and that's completed by the person who takes that sample. So that can be a medical professional such as a doctor, a nurse, pathology collector. We also perform in-house collections at identilab, because under the family law regulations, it specifies that an employee of a paternity testing lab who is employed for that purpose can collect those samples legally.
Yeah. I have a funny story with the affidavit when I was filling it in there. So my father came down with me to your offices in Salisbury, and we were sitting next to each other and we were filling out the forms, and I filled out mine fast because I'm a super fast writer, and I looked over at his, and I saw, because we both had to put my name up somewhere up the top of the form, and I was looking at it and I'm thinking, did I fill in part of his form? Because it looked like I'd written my name. And I said to him, did you write my name there? And he goes, yeah, I know.
You
And
have the same handwriting.
we had exactly the same handwriting. I'd never seen him write anything in all the years we've been in contact. And I almost wanted to go, forget that. I'm just
Yeah,
sending
we
this
don't need
in.
it.
Yeah, we don't need the DNA test. And when I got home that night, he stayed at my house, and I was telling my boys about it. And my son said, I'm not surprised. He said, have you looked at your hands? And we reached across the table and put our hands together, and they were exactly the same length, just everything, same
Does
wrinkles.
he have beautiful nails as well?
Uh, thank you so much. Yes. No, but he does have all those wrinkles and short, stubby fingers.
It's
And
nature versus nurture, isn't it?
it is, yeah. But it was, yeah, it was really, yeah, it added something to the experience, I'll be honest.
Yeah, yeah.
So, for legal testing, you said before sometimes a person can't physically attend the lab. So it can be done remotely, right?
That's right. Yeah. So we have customers all over the country and the world for that matter. We send out a secure satchel with all the collection materials in it. And then again, they go and have those samples collected at a medical professional, and they have to get that Form 3 witnessed. And then samples are returned to us in another secure satchel. So that chain of custody is maintained.
Yeah. So what are the typical timeframes for receiving the results?
Once we have all the samples in the lab, it's generally 3 to 5 business days. We do have an express service, which can get the results out in two business days. We do like to keep people in the loop. So if the samples come in separately, we will let them know, hey, we've got sample from Joe. We'll let you know when yours comes in, and vice versa. And then we'll let them know when all samples have been received and it's started that processing through the lab, so they know when to expect their results.
Yeah. So in terms of privacy and data security, how is the DNA data handled and stored at identilab?
So privacy is a massive issue for us, and a huge priority. Um, a lot of people who have sort of submitted a sample to an ancestry company will know that they've gone into this pool of millions of people, and that their data is in there. And I believe, certain research companies can access that data de-identified for the purposes of scientific research. That is definitely not the case here. When your samples are submitted to us, they are used solely for the purpose of that comparison that you have given consent to take place. If later on down the track you wanted to compare yourself to someone else, we would have to obtain a new consent from you for that purpose. So we definitely are not sharing information with anyone. It's all handled securely. We perform all our testing in-house, and we won't ever outsource any work, so that we can control that data privacy. The data that we're collecting is not just considered personal information, it's considered sensitive information under the privacy laws. So we've got really stringent requirements to meet, and obligations that we have in terms of keeping that data safe.
Yeah. Fantastic. I mean, it's something that comes up for everyone now, like with what happened with
Yes.
23andMe, it's a big concern. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my data's on 23andMe, and they've gone bankrupt, but it's my understanding they've been purchased by a pharmaceutical company. I've opted to keep my data there because I'm a scientist. I'm not very interesting. But if my data can help, with new discoveries, then I'm happy for them to use it for that purpose.
Yeah. So I think we've kind of covered most of the situations that arise in adoption contexts where legal DNA testing is helpful or required. I think we've pretty much covered all of that. Let me know if we haven't. But if someone isn't sure what type of test they need, can they contact you guys for a bit of guidance?
Absolutely. Yeah. So in particular, so if you went to our website, you could see that we do perform kinship testing, but we don't offer that for purchase online, because we feel it's really important to have that conversation, because some kinship relationships can be quite complex. So we really want to tease out what the relationship is that they're thinking exists, who's available to be tested, and then also explain to them the limitations of that test. So a kinship test is definitely nowhere near as conclusive as a paternity test, just because of the way we inherit our DNA through the generations. And we're looking at such a small amount of your DNA that it's possible that you share a great deal of DNA, but just outside the regions that we're looking at. So it is possible to get an inconclusive result with a kinship test. It doesn't mean you're not related. It's just that we haven't found that shared DNA. So that's why we like to include other relatives if we can, get a really great overall picture of what the situation is so that we can advise on what the best testing and the best way forward might be.
So Jigsaw Queensland, we get to notice patterns of how many people are coming in to use our service or why, that kind of stuff. And we have certainly noticed in the last few years that instead of people decreasing using our services, they've actually increased. And sometimes because a lot of our cohort's probably now getting into their 50s or around about that age or older, that a lot of them, their adoptive parents have passed away and they now feel like they can explore their family. So they've left it quite a long time, but they're going out and doing it, at this late stage.
Yeah.
Have you seen an increase in interest from adopted people, biological parents, or families impacted by adoption in recent years?
Definitely. And from people who had no idea that they were actually adopted.
Yeah.
So with the increase in interest in genealogy and people doing the AncestryDNA tests and the 23andMe DNA tests, they'll put their samples on there, and then all of a sudden they've matched with someone down the road who's a potential half sibling. So particularly in that age group, when there was a lot of secrecy around adoption and people were raised thinking that this was their sister when in actual fact it was their mother, and we hear a lot of stories like that. Yeah, definitely.
So are there any misconceptions about DNA testing that you frequently come across that you'd like to clear up?
It can't solve every question, definitely, and that's the situation with the kinship testing in particular. So before we, again, going back to the kinship testing conversations that we like to have with our clients, we warn them of the potential for an inconclusive result because we like them to know upfront, we're going to spend all of this money and it may not give them the answer that they're searching for. We can't tell them whether it will or it won't prior to the test. It's kind of, you just got to pull the trigger and have it go. We can later add more people to that scenario if need be. But yeah, it's really explaining that DNA is not like on the TV. It's not a 1 minute process and it has definite limitations.
Yeah, thank you. Do you have any stories, testing stories related to adoption that have stayed with you and that you can share?
Yeah, we do. We actually had one last week where it was a couple of siblings, full siblings. I'm not certain about the background story, but one of the siblings had been adopted and the other was actually raised in that family. So they came to find each other in some way, but and we didn't have any other family members to include in the testing. It was just them. So there was quite a chance of an inconclusive result, but we got such a strong result for them that they were full siblings, which was fantastic. But there is one case, and I've mentioned it to you before when we've been chatting about a lady who had placed her daughter for adoption in an Eastern European country some 30 or 40 years ago. And she had come to find someone who she considered was her daughter. And so we did an at-home peace of mind test for her and the daughter who was overseas. And so it took quite a while for that sample to come back to us. So it was all an anxious wait. But yeah, it confirmed that she had found her daughter. And when she received her results, she called because she was just, so overwhelmed. Then she was in tears. My staff member was in tears. It was just such an honor to be part of that because she was so thrilled to have reconnected with her daughter after all these years. And, she told us the story that, she thought about her every day and she'd never sort of given up hope in reconnecting with her. So that was just lovely. I know not all stories end that way. And it's a very sensitive situation for a lot of people, but yeah, that was beautiful.
Yeah, I'm getting goosebumps.
Yeah, me too.
So, what advice would you give to someone who is considering DNA testing for the first time as part of their adoption journey?
I think it's really valuable for them to go to a service like you in the first instance. Obviously, you've got ways and tricks of finding people and then facilitating the conversations between the two, because, people get their hopes up that they've found a family member, but and they want to connect with that person, but what if they actually aren't a family member? So when we do DNA testing that comes through someone like Jigsaw, we will only report those results to the Jigsaw support worker so that they can disseminate that information in case it's information that is going to be upsetting, because we know that you guys are trained in dealing with those sorts of situations and have your own personal experience in that as well. Because the results can be incredibly powerful, but really confronting it as well, if it's not what's expected. So I just recommend process your thoughts, think about what you want out of the process, and be emotionally prepared for both outcomes, support for a relationship or no support for a relationship, and get support.
Yeah, that's good advice. And we've certainly seen, heartbreakingly, people who have connected with family, particularly on their paternal side, and have gone quite far down the road of building connections with them to later on discover through maybe an AncestryDNA test or finally taking one that they're not related. And it's absolutely heartbreaking for everyone involved.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Look, Kate, thank you so much for joining me
Thank
today
you.
and for helping us just demystify DNA testing, because it can be really confusing, and particularly for anyone impacted by adoption, we're quite heightened when we're going about this process. There's a lot riding on it for us, and it can be quite triggering for us as well. And it's clear that these services can play an important role in helping adopted people and their families find answers, confirm connections, and update legal records as needed. So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, Jo.
And for anyone wanting to learn more about identilab's, I'm still tripping over it, identilab services.
We should change the name.
Something wrong with my tongue.
Okay, but a lot of people think that we're a dentist. Like, we're a dental lab.
Well, you are putting stuff in the mouth, If you'd like to explore them and what type of testing might suit your needs, you can visit their website, which is identilab, IDENTILAB.com.au. If you're looking for support resources or simply a space to be heard, please know that Jigsaw Queensland is here to help you. And if you'd like to support the podcast, leave a review, share this episode, or get in touch, because we love hearing from our listeners. And if you have your own story that you'd like to share, head to the Adopt Perspective page on the Jigsaw Queensland website and just fill out our prospective guest form. But thank you for listening. I'm Jo Sparrow, and take care and bye for now. Thanks for listening to the Adopt Perspective podcast. If you'd like to find out more, go to the podcast page on www.jigsawqueensland.com, and you'll find a wealth of information and resources on the website. If you reside in Queensland, you can reach Jigsaw Queensland's Forced Adoption Support Service on toll-free 1800 210313, or you can call Jigsaw on 07 33 58 6666. If you live in another state of Australia, you can still call the Forced Adoption Support Service number, and your call will be answered by the Forced Adoption Support Service in the state that you are calling from. In every other state, Relationships Australia operates this service. A big thank you to Matt Sparrow for composing and recording our original theme music. Until next time, I'm Jo Sparrow saying farewell from Adopt Perspective, a podcast for anyone affected by adoption.